In this lesson, we're going to be talking about metadata. Well, what's metadata? It's going to sound a little abstract, but metadata is data that's about data. In the case of a computer system, you've got all of these files, and there's really a couple of layers here. There's the actual file itself. So in this case, I've got an executable, and if I were to run this, it would do what it's supposed to do. But there's also information about this particular file. So I've got the executable, and in this case, it's an installation program, and the program does what the program does, but there's also information about the program, and you can see a lot of metadata, so data about this particular file that's available here. So I know what the type of the file is based on the file extension. I can also see what the size is. I can see the created, the modified, and the accessed times, as well as the attributes. So that's all metadata. In some cases, you can see information about previous versions of the file, and you can see details here. So I've got a size, a date modified. There may be a product name and a product version here. Again, that's all metadata. That's data that's stored inside the file that describes the file and who owns it and what it does. So that's what metadata is. Now, there's a lot of different file types that actually rely on metadata. MP3s is kind of a classic example of a file type that relies on metadata. MP3 files actually have a chunk of data that's stored inside them called an ID3 tag. So that ID3 tag stores information about the data in the file. So you can see here, this is all of the information that we can find about this particular MP3 file. And I just grabbed an MP3 file off the internet this morning so I could demonstrate this. So I've got a file size here, a duration. The file size isn't really that big of a deal. I can grab that off the file system, but the duration is something that I have to get out of the file. You can see the overall bit rate as well as the album and the track name, and you can also see the track position as well as the total number of tracks. I've also got the performer, and you can see all of the information about the audio. You can see it's MPEG version 1, and it's a stereo file, and you can see the bit rate mode as well as the bit rate and the number of channels, the sampling rate, all of that information. Now, the other interesting thing here, you can see the program that was actually used to write this particular file. We can see that it's iTunes version 6.0.4. So that's kind of interesting. Now, another file type that uses information or can use information, metadata information, is image files. So I've actually got this program here called GeoSetter, and GeoSetter is just an example of a program that will look at and alter information about pictures. So inside different picture file types, there is a set of data which is really metadata. So it's data about the picture itself. And in this particular case, I've got a JPEG here, and it's got EXIF data in it. So EXIF. Now, if I were to run my mouse over here, you can see the name, the aperture, the focal length, the exposure time. So there's a lot of information about the picture itself that is stored inside the picture. So you could also see the camera manufacturer and the camera type that was used to store this particular picture, or take this particular picture rather. In addition to that type of data about the picture and the way that it was taken, you could also store information about where it was taken. And if you've got a smartphone or just a camera phone, you may have a GPS inside the phone, and your camera application may actually tag the photo with information about where it was taken. So there may be GPS coordinates that are stored inside the picture, and if you had a program like GeoSetter and that data was stored in that picture, you could bring up a map using those coordinates. So we could actually see where the picture was taken, and we could look at it on a map. Now, there's a lot of other information that is or could be stored inside this file. So I've got contact information here. I could store contact information inside this file, so I could load up my contact information. Now, there's something else to mention here. In another lesson, we talk about steganography, and steganography is where you hide data inside other data or inside somewhere where somebody wouldn't otherwise look for it or maybe know that it's there. So in the case of a picture file, the important thing is the picture, and you're going to want to look at the picture. But inside there, where we store metadata, you could store some information you don't want anybody to see. So I could store something here inside this address field, for example. Now, there's a lot of other information. You can see there's a location tab, and in this case, there's actually nothing stored here because the camera that was used to take this picture didn't actually have location information. It wasn't location aware. So we didn't actually store that information. I could store information about the artist as well as the caption. I could have special instructions here. I've got a date. You can see that the date was 9/7/2006 at 1:13 in the afternoon. I could actually set a time zone in there because there was no time zone set when the picture was taken. Again, all of this is information that a digital camera would store automatically. If you were to import pictures from an external source, like if you had negatives and you were to scan them in, you may actually want to store this metadata in there. You may want to set a particular date and not have it be the scan date. So you may want to change some of this. But this is information that could be really interesting when it comes to an investigation, because you can see when pictures were taken and, of course, the camera that was used, and there's date information. And like I said, if there's a smartphone or a GPS-aware camera phone that was used to take a particular picture, then you can see where the picture was actually taken. So that's interesting and useful information as well. Now, these aren't the only file types, of course, that use metadata. I've got a Word document here. The important thing here is the Word document, right? But inside the Word document, I can actually store other pieces of information. So I could actually set a title. I've got a title here, and I could have a subject, and I could set myself as the manager. Now, all of this is information that would be stored inside the file itself, not actually stored in the document. So here's the document. You can see I just set a bunch of metadata. So I set a title. Now, you don't see the title showing up here in the Word document anywhere. Now, I could also go back and I could set some custom fields. So I could set a typist, and I could set the typist value to me. I could also set a telephone number. Now, I could also add a custom field here, and you can see I've got a couple of fields there or properties that I can set inside the file. And again, they don't actually show up in the text of the document anywhere, so that's all metadata. Now, as always with metadata, there's interesting information that could be stored in terms of who the author was or the creation date and time. So metadata is really useful to be able to see additional information about the files that you're looking at. You may not want to only look at the files and the data that's in those files from a typical representational viewpoint. So a picture, you may not only want to look at the picture, you may want to look at the metadata that goes along with the picture so you can see when the picture was created, how it was created. In the case of an MP3 file, for example, we could see that it was created with iTunes and a particular version of iTunes. So there's a lot of information that gets stored inside of files that's stored as metadata. So it's data about the data that you're looking at. And again, that can be really useful as you're going through an investigation. So make sure as you are looking through all of your different files that you're looking at the metadata and not just the representation that you would normally see, but you're looking at an EXIF viewer, for example, or an ID3 tag viewer, or you're looking at the properties in Word documents. All of that metadata can be really useful as you are going through an investigation.